Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to Stop Relying on Sales Alone, Unlock Service Profit webinar. My name's Anita Lian. I'm from Everyday of Canada, and I will be your moderator today. So today's session is brought to you in partnership with IDS. Their ongoing work with dealerships across North America, including their RECT reporting and dealer forums that continues to support improved service performance across the countries. So if your dealership's profitability depends heavily on unit sales, you're not alone, but it does leave you exposed to market swings. Today is all about shifting that equation and exploring how your service and parts department can become a more consistent, reliable profit driver. So now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our speaker, Matt Richards. He's the Director of Dealer Relations at IDS. Matt brings over 20 years of hands-on experience on the retail side of the RV industry, and he's done just about every job in the dealership along his journey. He's owned his own dealership and he stayed on as a partner after that sale, and he's held dealership roles including general manager, fixed operations director across multiple locations, and ultimately the chief of operations at 9-location dealership group. And throughout that journey, he's leveraged IDS to manage and scale operations, giving him deep practical insights into what works, what doesn't, when it comes to running profitable fixed operations. And so now he's on the other side. He's helping dealers like you apply those same strategies to improve performance and unlock profitability in their own service departments. So before I pass over to Matt, I just wanted to ask to please type in your comments and questions into either the comments chat or questions at the top of the page, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. And you will also receive a copy, the recording of this webinar. So please join me in welcoming Matt.
Thank you. Appreciate that. And I appreciate everybody who showed up today, anyone who's watching this recording as well. So hopefully you can walk away with something useful from this. But with that, I'll jump right into it. So yeah, my name's Matt. I am the Director of Dealer Relations here at IDS, and I have spent my career in RVs. And while I've done all sorts of different things throughout the dealership, most recently as Chief of Operations, I've cut my teeth in fixed operations and service and parts. So this is kind of near and dear to my heart. And I'm excited to share some of the things that I've learned with you guys. So today, what we're going to be talking about specifically is a concept of fixed absorption. And we'll start by defining what that is. I'm sure there's people on this webinar that know or are very familiar with that term, but I'm also confident there are several people who aren't familiar with that term or have questions about what does that really mean, how do we calculate it. So we'll start by defining it and talking about how we determine where our current fixed absorption rate is and why it's important that we focus on this. And then we'll move into some more practical pieces around what are workflow adjustments or processes that we can put in place that can help us achieve this. So starting by just defining the term, what do we mean when we talk about fixed absorption? And what we mean by fixed absorption is a state, and I should specify 100% fixed absorption. You have a fixed absorption rate. Everybody does who has a service and parts department. But we want to get that to 100% fixed absorption. And that would be referring to a state in which a dealership's fixed operations, in most cases service and parts, generate enough operating revenue to cover all of the expenses of the dealership minus the direct cost to unit sales. You can imagine if we can achieve that point where we can be confident that service and parts is going to cover all of the operating expenses of the business, we're going to have as close to a bulletproof business as we can create. So now we've defined it. What do we need to determine where we're at? and measure this going forward. As we all know, we manage what we measure. So we got to start by setting the baseline and determining where we're at. So we need to know a couple things to get that calculation. We need to know first, what is our gross profit from fixed operations? So this is just simply the sum of our gross profit generated by service and parts, our body shop. We'll talk about some other areas that could possibly fall into that bucket. But on top of that, we also need to know what is our adjusted overhead expense, or our AOE, of all of the dealership, of the whole dealership. And so that's going to include things like rent, utilities, management and administrative salaries, administrative expenses, office supplies, furniture, security, all that kind of stuff. What it's going to exclude is our costs that we can directly relate to unit sales. So things like unit commissions, sales commissions, F&I commissions, things like probably our carrying costs of our inventory, our interest on our flooring, inventory write-downs for rolling stock. So those are the types of things we're going to exclude, and I'm going to show you some examples here in just a second. I do want to call out the fact that there is some nuance here, and there are some gray areas, and what's really important is that you as a dealership, owners, general managers, any stakeholders in this process all agree on what we include and what we don't include as we work towards achieving this 100% of fixed absorption rate. Because there is potentially some gray area, and there are some decisions that are going to have to be made as you're deciding what's right for you. But essentially, if we're going to start out by determining what is our gross profit from fixed operations, in a consolidated sense, we're going to just look at our service and parts departments. If you have rentals and storage, typically you would include that in this gross profit calculation. You would also include the expenses directly related to rentals and storage in your calculation for overhead expenses. If you're not going to include rentals and storage in this calculation, make sure you also exclude the gross profit from those things, as well as the expenses related to them while you're measuring this. But typically it's accepted that rentals and storage would be considered fixed operations. If you participate in any sort of vehicle leasing program, those would not be included. Those would be considered sales. So in this case, in this example dealership, we have about $3.5 million in a gross profit from fixed operations. Then we need to go into the part that's a little bit more complicated, or there's a little bit more nuance to, and we need to peel out all of the expenses and costs that don't relate that relate directly to sales, I should say. So you can see in my example here, I'm peeling out things like interest on my floor plan for new vehicles. If I had interest on used vehicles, I'd pull those out as well. I'm pulling out things like RV. You can see here show expense. I'm pulling out the show expense from my calculation because that's something that I wouldn't incur if I wasn't selling units. I'm also going to peel out commissions related to the sale of those units in F&I. And then anything else, any other delivery costs that are directly related to sales that we're not going to also recognize revenue related to them in service. So if I have delivery costs related to PDIing a unit, but I'm also going to recognize that revenue in services gross profit, I want to leave those in. If I'm going to peel that gross profit out, I would want to leave those out. But any delivery expenses that don't have a gross profit counter in our fixed operations, we want to make sure we peel out of there. In this case, I don't have goodwill peeled out. I don't have that highlighted, but if you have a goodwill account in your expense accounts that is directly related to unit sales and then only used or repurposed to, satisfy customers that are unhappy with the delivery of their unit or something like that, you would want to peel those out as well. So in this example, what I've come up with is I've got $3.5 million in gross profit from my fixed operations. And then I have about $6.3 million in adjusted overhead expenses. So if I do the math, it's real simple. I'm going to take my gross profit and I'm going to divide it by my overhead, and that's going to give me my absorption rate. In this case, I have about a 55% absorption rate. So now we want to talk about, if I have 55% absorption rate, is that good? Is it bad? Obviously, the target is 100. We want, in a perfect world, I would want this $6.3 million to also be reflected in my gross profit or more. You know, if I can get 110% or 120% absorption, great. Sky's the limit here. But the target's 100. But what's good? And unfortunately, in the RV industry, this concept of fixed absorption has not been a heavily talked about subject until recently. But in automotive, in the automotive world, it's been one of the key performance indicators for dealerships for decades. I did through a little research, I found that the average automotive dealer, full service automotive dealer, is running at about 64% absorption. Anything above 75% absorption is considered good. Anything below 50 is considered poor as a general mark. But for new automotive dealers, especially automotive dealers that deal in higher end vehicles like, you know, Audis, Mercedes, BMWs, anything under 100% is considered poor. They're looking for 100% or better as their benchmark standard. So hopefully that gives some context. Unfortunately, right now we don't have real great RV specific statistics for this, but I think that will grow over the coming years as dealers focus more on this. So why do we want to focus on absorption? Obviously, the more of our expenses we can absorb through our more stable revenue streams like service and parts, the more stable our business is. The more flexibility we have to stay competitive in sales from a margin standpoint, even when sales get hard, because we know that our overhead is going to be covered by our service and parts activities. It's going to give us a buffer when economic times are uncertain, and stabilize our business when we have outside forces, as we do right now, that are outside of our control, but are definitely going to impact our business. And typically they impact unit sales disproportionately. When things are good, unit sales go through the roof. When things are bad, unit sales fall off a cliff. But service and parts stay relatively steady. If you're like most dealers, your backlog of service and parts is typically pretty substantial. If you don't have enough service work to leverage in your dealership, if you look at this and say, there's no way I could get to that, I just don't have enough work to do, then you need to step back and look at the size of your business. But for most dealers, we have a steady stream of service if we can do it. And then obviously, even in good times, the higher our absorption rate is, the more profitable we are overall. If we can get to a place where we're at 100% fixed absorption, we're technically profitable before we sell a unit. And then everything we make from selling units goes right to our bottom line. So we're going to talk, now that we've defined what fixed absorption is, we've talked about how we calculate it, and we've talked about why it's important. We're going to jump into some of the things that we can do to positively impact it. I'm going to focus today on a few key areas. I'm going to focus on efficiency, expense control, and mitigating risk. And then at the end, we're also going to talk about using ROIs to determine when we should spend money to make money, so to speak. So the first thing that I want to talk about is clear and prompt customer communication. This is a high-level concept that I think everybody probably, if you were pressed and said, hey, do you think communicating to your customers clearly and promptly is going to impact your profitability? Everybody would say hypothetically, yes, it should. Happy customers mean customers buy more, so on and so forth. But there are some clear and really tangible benefits to profitability and fixed absorption that we get when we communicate clearly and promptly. We want to make sure that and what do we mean by clear and prompt? We mean setting proper expectations when we're communicating with the customer, and that we're communicating often. So not just that we're following up quickly when we get a message from a customer to call them back, but that we're proactively communicating with our customers before they're asking for updates. And why do we do this? What does it do for us? It's going, first and foremost, it builds trust. When we are clearly communicating what the customer should expect, and when we're proactively communicating with the customer before they're asking for updates, we're building trust. And we should all know that people do business with people they trust. It also means that they're more likely to take us at face value when we tell them what something is going to cost or what needs to be done to resolve a complaint that they have. They're more likely to take us at face value and less likely to push back on things like that. It's also going to help us mitigate risk of things like litigation. Obviously, if we're communicating proactively with our customer and we're setting clear expectations, we're less likely to have customers confused and upset, and we're less likely to end up having to provide goodwill or litigate a dispute in court and things like that. We're also less likely to do work that in the end we don't get paid for. If you're like me, I had a point in our dealership's evolution where I saw us letting money siphon through our fingers simply because we weren't communicating well. And when it came time for the customer to pick up their vehicle and pay their bill, it wasn't what they expected. And we ended up giving something away because we didn't communicate clearly what the expectation should be in advance. So at a high level, clear, prompt, and proactive communication is going to help us across the board. And that's going to be a recurring theme. So I wanted to touch on it first. So the process of service, and we're going to focus mostly on fixed operations as it relates to service today. It's where you can make the most impact quickly. Obviously, there's things that you can do in retail parts sales, your over-the-counter sales, that can also improve this metric, but we're going to focus mostly on how it relates to service today. And for service, this typically starts with scheduling. We need to have a strong scheduling process in place that's consistent and comprehensive. So we need to control the intake of units. We need to have a process that controls the pace and timing. We need to ensure that service riders are available when a customer's showing up to drop off and prepped and ready to intake that customer. And we should take the opportunity to pre-plan some of the jobs before the customer arrives. We want to know what the customer is coming in for at a high level so we can be prepared for that. We're obviously going to have those things that come up when the customer shows up and they say, hey, Wyatt's here. Can you look at this and can you look at that? We want those things. We want to be able to upsell those things, but we should have a clear understanding of the primary reason the customer is showing up in the first place. Why do we want to control the intake process? Well, we want to do this primarily because we want the service riders to be able to proactively be out there with the customer and see all of the problems. We want to be able to properly prepare the unit and the descriptions on the work order so that the technician knows clearly what the customer's complaints are so that we don't have a lot of back and forth going on that slows down the process. And we want the opportunity to upsell to the customer. We want the opportunity to tell the customer about specials that we have going on, about opportunities that they have to take advantage of maybe some deals we have on different types of services. We want an opportunity to walk the unit and look for additional opportunities to upsell. We also want to mitigate our risk by being able to walk this unit and identify damage that is on the body of the unit before the customer leaves from that drop-off appointment, so that we don't get accused of doing something that we didn't do. And so that we know if we did something or not. I had many occasions where a customer accused us of damaging a unit while it was in our possession, and I paid for it because I ultimately couldn't say whether we did or didn't. I didn't have any reference. Could it have been us? Absolutely, it could have been us. Could it have been there when they dropped it off? Sure, it could have been. I had no way of knowing. So for all of those reasons, we want our intake controlled. What we don't want ever is for the customer to call into service, the service writer to be really busy, pick up the phone, not have time for that customer and say, you know what, we're good, just bring it in whenever you're available. I'm here all day from 9 to 5. And then we just leave this open-ended, unknown drop-off that's going to show up. And in all likelihood, as a service writer, I'm not going to be available to check them in. If that's happening in your dealership, that is the first bottleneck or roadblock that you need to alleviate to improve your shop's efficiency, is have a good controlled intake process that's comprehensive, that allows your service writers to walk the vehicle top to bottom, get pictures of all of the related things, and I'll go over that intake process in detail here in a minute. But we need to have a controlled intake process. We also need to have a consistent process for dispatching work to technicians. We don't want a situation where technicians are coming to us when they finish a job saying, hey, I'm done, I need something else to work on. We need to be more proactive and more intentional about the way we dispatch work to our shop. We want to make sure that we're dispatching work that's appropriate for our technicians. And this goes for any size shop, right? This goes from shops that have one person managing and writing all of the service with 2 or 3 technicians, all the way up to shops that have multiple service writers, dozens of technicians, multiple locations. These principles don't change. We want to make sure that we know our technicians' skill set. If we have a large body of technicians, we probably need a way to group those technicians into skill sets. If you use IDS, we have tools in the system that allow you to do that. If you're using a different DMS, I'd encourage you to talk to your DMS provider about what tools exist in the system to help you with that, to manage technician skill set and dispatch. But in IDS, it's built in. We also want to make sure our technicians have easy access to these work orders through technology. We want to avoid paper. If you're still running a highly paper-heavy service department, the big downside of paper, besides the fact that it can get lost and it requires transcription into the digital record at some point, besides that, the big downside of paper is it's a physical thing that has to be moved around. If I can leverage technology to dispatch my work, I can dispatch work and get that work order from my hands to the technician's hands at the speed of light, as fast as it will process. If I'm doing it with a paper work order, I can do it at the speed at which I can walk that work order back to the technician, or that technician can walk up to me and retrieve that work order. And every time I need to exchange information from that work order, I'm doing the same thing back and forth. We kill a huge amount of time in our shop, of our technicians' time specifically, by forcing them to manually deliver messaging back and forth between themselves and service writers. So we want to leverage technology here. With IDS, we have mobile application. You can dispatch the work from the DMS directly, and then the technicians can access everything they need access to from the application. There really isn't any reason that they should need a paperwork order if you're using IDS and leveraging the mobile app. So we want to make sure that that process of dispatching is controlled. We want to make sure we make it as easy for the technicians to access that work as possible. And we want to make sure that we're dispatching proactively enough that when the technician finishes the job, they know what job is going to come in the shop next. So they don't have to wander around waiting for a technician or waiting for a service writer to give them the next thing to work on. If you've ever walked into your shop and asked a technician what they're working on and they said nothing, I don't have anything to work on right now, I'm waiting for service writer A to get free with that customer so that they can give me a work order, that should be a huge red flag that you have a problem in your dispatching process. And it was exactly that kind of feedback that I heard from technicians that encouraged me to pursue a more comprehensive and consistent dispatching process so that our technicians had work in their hopper, so to speak, all the time that they could just move on to without having to talk to a service writer. We'll go into a little bit more about how we can help the dispatch process here in just a minute, but I want to keep talking about the scheduling process. When it comes to dispatching and scheduling, if I don't prepare, if I don't include my porters and parts people in my daily shop plan, I'm still going to run into the same bottlenecks. My technician may know what they need to work on next, but my porter hasn't had a chance to dig it out of the back lot or wherever it's stored. My parts people haven't had a chance to gather up the parts, make sure that they're in one place where the technician can access them. So bringing all of the key stakeholders into the scheduling or dispatching process is going to be key to having a smooth transition between units. We have a huge amount, there's a huge efficiency lag when a unit is finished and then the next one needs to come in, and we need to minimize that as much as possible. So bring your porters into the plan. If you're not doing it, I would encourage your service teams to have a morning meeting every day to make sure that everybody is on the same page about what the plan is for the day. This doesn't need to be a long drawn out thing. If you're not doing these and you're hesitant to implement them because you're worried it's going to be this long drawn out session where people start to complain about everything that they can think of, and we start to get into the weeds, and an hour later we've just wasted the first part of the morning talking rather than doing. You just need to put really clear guardrails around that morning meeting. That morning meeting should be talking about what is delivering today, what is the plan for each technician, and that is it. Maybe you talk a little bit about what's going into tomorrow if there's some sort of complexity around it, so that we can be prepared for it. But really, we should be talking about today, maybe tomorrow, and really no further out than that. And there should be clear guardrails around the fact that we're only talking about the dispatch plan for today. If there's other things we need to talk about, we'll address those in a separate meeting, maybe at the end of the week or the beginning of the week or whenever we do that. But this daily meeting is just to get our ducks in a row for today's plan. Bringing your porter in the plan early lets them dig out units that are buried. If you have a lot that is really easily accessible, numbered service stalls that units can be pulled out of very quickly, maybe you don't need to pre-stage units. But at one point, we had 9 locations in the organization that I was running operations in, and many of our stores did not have a lot that was real easy to move units around on. And during the busy parts of the season, especially, I might have service units that were buried 3 or 4 units deep. We had to move 3 or 4 units to get one service unit out. I don't want to find out about that once my technician's ready for the next unit. That unit needs to be pre-staged. And that can be handled by bringing your porters into the conversation in those morning meetings, as well as giving your porters access to view that dispatch calendar so that they know what they need to be staging next after they pull in the technician's unit that they're working on now. And in our organization, that's the way we did it. A unit got pulled in for a technician, and the very next thing the porter or forklift driver did is went out and grabbed the next one on that technician's schedule and staged it up at the front of the lot so that when the technician was ready, that transition was very, very quick. The other thing that we want to do here during this process is bringing parts into the conversation. I think a lot of dealers talk about the fact that they would love to pre-kit parts for work orders for technicians. You know, pull all the parts that are needed off the shelf, any special orders that have arrived. Maybe if this is the second repair event cycle on this particular unit, we may now have parts that have come in for it. You know, we all love the idea of pre-kitting those parts and having them set up so that the technician can just come grab them and go back and work on the unit. And there's a variety of ways that this can be done. But if you've thought about this, I would encourage you to pursue it. This is a real problem, and sometimes the solution can appear to be expensive on the surface. I'll explain that a little bit more, but often the return is much higher. What we did in my dealerships is we finally broke down and we hired somebody who did just this job. And what I mean by just this job is their entire work was centered around parts for the shop. They didn't work directly with customers. I didn't have them stocking shelves. I didn't have them doing other ancillary tasks. Their job was to check in, receive special order parts, open those parts, inspect them at the time of receiving. If needed, they repackaged the parts properly so that they wouldn't get damaged sitting on the shelf. They bin located those special order parts so they knew right where they were. They handled return goods right then. If a part came in wrong or damaged, they handled that return right there so that we didn't end up having to pay for parts multiple times and incur that expense just because we didn't check them in properly. And then in addition to that, when a technician finished up a job and the new job came in, their parts for that new job, everything that we knew they needed, was all set up at the front of the shop in an area that was designated for them. And the technician knew they could just go up to their designated area and grab everything that was in that space. And those were all the parts that were here related to the work that they were about to work on. Just like our porters, that parts person did that work as soon as the technician pulled their new unit in. They prepped the parts for the unit that was going to come in next. The important piece here, and it's the recurring theme of everything I said, is proactivity. We need to be doing this before the need arises. Once the need is already there, we're losing time. Anything we can do before the technician is ready means that we don't have that downtime between jobs. Yeah, a strong scheduling process, both from customer appointments for drop-offs as well as dispatching and bringing everybody into the fold, is going to be critical to success here. We're going to mitigate the lost expense of wrong parts. We're going to mitigate downtime for our customers, which helps to reduce goodwill as well as litigation. And we're going to improve the efficiency of our technicians. We're going to mitigate their downtime, which improves profitability because we're charging for that technician time. So we talked about having a good, strong scheduling process. Part of that includes a separate process, which is how we actually intake the units. So we've scheduled the unit. We know we're going to be available when the customer shows up to drop it off because we've done a good job of scheduling those appointments. But now what do we do when the customer shows up? So there's a few things that should be happening every time. And if you're not doing these things, you're letting money just siphon through your fingers here. The first thing is we should start by walking out with the customer and documenting the condition of the vehicle. This includes 4 corner pictures of the vehicle, as well as walking up the ladder and looking at the roof. We do this for a few reasons. Obviously, the first one is we don't want to get accused of doing damage to a vehicle that we didn't do, so we want to document the condition. Simple 4 corner pictures and a picture of the front and back of the roof can help to mitigate that almost entirely. Even if we don't notice the damage in question at the time we take the pictures, we're able to go back and reference those pictures if the complaint comes in and validate whether or not that damage existed or not. So those four corner and rooftop pictures are critical. If you're not doing that, you should do that. If your DMS does not allow for document attachment or picture attachment, then you need to do it and save those somewhere else. If you're on IDS, you could attach those right to the work order, and those will follow that customer for the life of the customer in the DMS, whether they own that specific unit or not. It will also follow the life of that unit, whether it's owned by that customer or not, and that's all done automatically when you attach a picture to a work order. So if you're on IDS, that we make that easy for you. If you're not, you'll need to store those somewhere else, but it doesn't change the fact that this will save you money. It also is going to give you an opportunity to upsell some of the most profitable work we can do, which is that insurance work or body work that we do. I can't tell you how many times we have gotten large, profitable $10,000 roof jobs because we got on a roof when a customer brought it in and we found a big tear in their roof that they didn't even know they had. So now you're helping the customer in the sense that they didn't let this big open exposed hole live in their roof and cause further damage. You're helping yourself because you're getting a nice insurance job out of it. And you didn't get blamed for damage that you didn't do. So all the way around, nothing but good things there. With IDS, because of the way you can attach documents, this next one, blue tape, you could in essence not use blue tape. And in fact, in our dealerships, we didn't. We just went around to each job and took a picture of the affected areas for each job. That way, when the technicians logged into that job on their application, they could just reference those quickly. If you don't have the ability to do that, get a roll of blue painter's tape and be tagging those pieces of trim, the blemishes on the wall, the nicks in the floors, whatever they are. Technicians waste a huge amount of time looking for problems that are stated on the work order, but could be any, trim hanging in living room, could be any number of 100 different pieces of trim. And often they're not real obvious if you don't know what they're talking about. So creating a situation where the technicians don't have to hunt for that, don't have to come back up and ask you about it, is critical to maximizing your shop's efficiency. Getting any damage you do want to estimate that you find that you're trying to upsell, get them estimates quickly, even on the spot. Make this as easy for the customer as possible. If you point out damage that they either didn't know they had or they did know they had, but maybe didn't want to repair, or maybe they just want to patch that hole in the roof, take the opportunity to explain how the insurance process works and how easy you can make it for them. All they really need to do is initiate the claim. Once they've initiated the claim and told the agent where they've taken the vehicle for service, at that point, you can handle most of that process for them. So offer to do it. Many times we did big insurance jobs where the customer wasn't going to take a claim, and through just a little bit of education, the customer changed their mind, took a claim out, and we went from a $200 patch job to a $10,000 roof job. So use those opportunities for that. There's other things here, but in the interest of time, I'm going to keep moving because we are running low. So one of the other things that I want to call out here is we want to limit the number of times that the unit goes back in and out of the shop. I've seen in shops many times where a technician comes up and tells the service writer, hey, I'm done with this. Service writer's caught off guard. We didn't do our proactive dispatching. And so now the service writer's scrambling to find work for them. And they realize that one part showed up for this work order. So they say, hey, there's a part here for this. Go ahead and do that. We go through the whole process of switching the units out. 35 minutes later, the unit comes in, the technician fixes one thing, and then the unit goes back out. We want to avoid that whenever possible. We think we're being proactive by, hey, one part showed up, let's fix the thing now. But if that vehicle is going to stick around until other parts show up, don't pull it back in. Work on something else. Diagnose a unit that hasn't been ran through the shop yet, whatever it is. We want to limit repairs to 2 events. We want to do the initial diagnostic, And that diagnostic may be diagnostic. It may be just the technician's initial run through to determine if it's something that can fix with or without parts, or determine what parts are needed, whatever that is. We have an initial repair event where the technicians look at it for the first time, repair what they can, get other things authorized, ordered, and diagnosed. And then we have a final repair event. Now, obviously, there are exceptions to these rules. We're talking about the 95%. We will be flexible. We work outside of those parameters when we absolutely have to. But if we can get, 9 out of 10 work orders to fall within these guidelines, we're going to improve our performance substantially. So limiting that wasted downtime by limiting repair events to 2 per work order is going to help substantially. And it looks like I'm coming up on time here. I think that was 45 minutes. So I think we have a few more minutes for questions, but I'm going to quickly try and make my final points here before I wrap up. So things to keep in mind. Everything that I've talked about here is all focused around a couple things. That's the main thing here is keeping technicians in their bay. There's only a few parts of the dealership that actually generate us revenue. Everything outside of technicians, F&I, and salespeople really are there in support of those roles. So me as a general manager or chief operating officer, I am a support role. I am there to help remove roadblocks and barriers to success for the people at the front of my business who are generating revenue, technicians and salespeople. Everything else we do should be in the interest of keeping those 2 roles primarily productive. And in this case, we're talking about technicians. In service, only technicians generate me revenue, really. I mean, we can make the argument, I'm going to sublet some stuff, I'm going to mark it up. We're going to sell parts, obviously, those are going to help. But all of that really comes around from generates from the technician initially. So they're the ones who are generating the revenue for us. They only generate us revenue when they're turning a wrench, walking back and forth between the service counter and their bay, hunting down parts, running back out to vehicles to gather up serial numbers and things like that weren't gathered the first time around, getting pictures that weren't there, asking for clarification, then waiting while you make phone calls. All of these things take up our technicians' time without generating us any revenue. So we want to minimize those at every turn. We also want to prevent techs from doing work that they're not going to get paid for, even if it is repair work. And that's where that clear, proactive communication comes into play. If something's not going to be covered by warranty, we want to head that off early and often. So that we don't have customers that are expecting free work that isn't in fact going to be free. If we're going to do the work, somebody should pay for it. We also want to establish clear workflow boundaries. What's the path for authorization? What needs authorization? And we need to provide enough trust in our technicians to allow them to do some of this warranty work that's really simple without pre-authorization. So if you do have a very stringent pre-authorization policy in place, I'd encourage you to revisit that to some extent. Pre-authorization is great, and I encourage it when it's appropriate. It should happen on things that are going to take any substantial amount of time. But I would rather let 1 or 2 .1s get finished and then not paid if it means that I can get 10 or 11 others done very, very quickly. If I'm forcing every 0.1 and 0.2 repair to be pre-authorized, I'm actually stepping over dollars to pick up pennies. So trust your technicians to make simple repairs without pre-authorization, but enable them through technology to ensure they gather everything you need so that you can get paid after the fact. Make it easy to gather pictures, make it easy for them to apply their notes. Don't make it so cumbersome that the technician's mindset is, this isn't worth it for me to document what I did and take a picture because it's too much work. I'm going to get paid 0.1 or 0.2 for this, and it's going to take me 0.3 just to document it. You got to tear those barriers down so that your technicians aren't thinking that way about it. We want them thinking, if I can do 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.1s, that's an hour. And I can probably do those things in 10 or 15 minutes and bill an hour for those 10 or 11.1s. So we want to make sure we're setting our technicians up for that mindset. Remember, every 6 minutes of work we do in most shops is somewhere around $20. That's a $20 bill. So would I take pictures and document it for a $20 bill? Yeah, I probably would. And we could do other things to improve this. We can set up canned jobs so they're easy to use, easy to load. We can set up, if our system allows it through the check-in process like IDS does, we can set up easy upsell, click to upsell items in our appointment scheduler and things like that. So leverage technology wherever we can to help with these things. And the last thing I want to talk about before I open this up to questions is just when we're making decisions around things like the expensive solution to a real problem I mentioned earlier that we solved by hiring somebody to check in parts, return parts, and stage parts for technicians. Admittedly, that was an expensive solution, but it was an expensive problem. And when we applied a simple formula to it, it made total sense. That formula was easy. We estimated the amount of time that we were spending or wasting, I should say, on this operational gap. And then we took our labor rate, we multiplied it by our current shop's efficiency, and we multiplied that by the number of technicians. If the cost of time spent is less than the cost of doing the thing that I want to do, of buying the tool that I need, of paying for a feature within my DMS that I don't have, of leveraging a new software program that I'm not currently leveraging, if the cost of that is less than that simple calculation of my return on solving this problem, then I should do it. And in that case, the example I gave, we found very quickly that the cost of this $20 an hour employee was far less than the cost of letting that time slip through our fingers. And we saw real meaningful improvements in recognized revenue from that initiative. And we saw it very, very quickly. So when you're trying to make decisions about spending money to make money, just apply this simple formula to determine what is it worth, and then weigh that against the cost. If it's worth more than it costs, it's worth doing. With that, I think I've been going for about 50 minutes here. I do want to leave some time for questions, so I'm going to go ahead and open it up to that.
Well, thank you, Matt, for sharing your insights and the practical strategies. I think your messaging on having clear, prompt, and proactive, whether it's communication or scheduling or any of the other areas, really does speak volumes, and that really applies across the field. So just want to invite everybody to put in your questions, comments in the chat or in questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. Perhaps while we're waiting, I do have questions that came through just prior to the start of the presentation. So taking your case study of the dealer with the 55% fixed absorption rate, so what would you recommend that the first step that they take? Because there's so many different areas. So where do they start?
Yeah, I would start with where I started here. I would start at looking at your you already know what I'm assuming you already know what your efficiency and stuff is. So if you're not measuring your shop's efficiency, you need to start there. You need to start by measuring your key performance metrics in your service department, as well as your parts department. So I need to be looking at things like my average parts margin. I need to be looking at things like my shop's effective efficiency. If I'm not measuring those things, that's where I need to start. We only manage what we measure. But assuming that we're measuring those basic metrics, I would start by looking at my intake process. How am I bringing customers into my service department? Am I letting them just drop off? Or do I have a good scheduling process where I know when a customer's showing up, I know why they're coming in, and I know I'm going to be available to meet that customer and go through this intake process every time. That's where I would start. I would start by looking at that. I think there's probably very few things that you can do in your shop that will make more of a positive impact in more areas than having a really good intake process.
Okay, and so on the flip side, if someone's working at a higher level of efficiency, let's say 70%, as you mentioned, that's a good figure. So how do you convince them or help themselves believe they can get to 100%?
So first thing I'll tell you is I can tell you that you can do it because I had shops that were doing it. I wasn't at 100% fixed absorption across 9 locations. I like to think that we were pretty good, but we weren't that good. But I had multiple stores that individually were running at 100% fixed absorption. So it is 100% possible. There are lots of dealers out there that do it. There are a lot more that don't, but there are lots of examples that do. But if you're already running at a high efficiency and you're not meeting this, or you're not even close, so to speak. If you were running at 75% efficient, but your fixed absorption rate was down at 55%, I would start by analyzing how you're calculating your efficiency. Am I giving the shop credit for things that I can't get paid for? Now, if I do a PDI on a unit, I'm capitalizing that cost against the cost of the unit, and I'm reflecting that when I sell the unit. So that's okay. We count that as real revenue because at some point we're going to recognize it when we sell the unit. But if I'm giving my shop credit for doing a bunch of work that nobody is paying for, it's just getting covered by my service policy account or my goodwill account or wherever that is. Look there, because if I have a good efficiency and I'm not coming close to this number, or my number is very low, I probably have a fallacy in the way that I'm calculating my efficiency. If I don't have a fallacy in the way I'm calculating my efficiency, if I truly am running at a high efficiency and I'm still at a low absorption rate, I have no choice but to look at my overhead expenses. Where am I overspending? Because if I'm generating the expected revenue and I'm still not covering my expenses, then my expenses are too high. But more often than not, I think you're going to find that the dealer, there's a fallacy in the way I'm calculating my efficiency. Now, I will say, to get to 100% fixed absorption, your effective efficiency needs to be at 100% or very near it, if not better than 100% efficient to get there. So 75% efficient sounds good for a lot of dealers, and in many cases it is. You would be above average at 75%. But to get to full fixed absorption, 100% fixed absorption, it's probably not high enough. The shops that I had that were at it or approaching it were over 90% efficient, meaning that truly, if I had a technician on site on premise at my dealership for 10 hours, I was collecting my full labor rate for 9 of those 10 hours at least. So you do have to run very high to get there. This isn't easy, but it is definitely doable.
Thank you. I see a question. It's on more related to software. So you mentioned that different people in the team, like whether it be service advisor, or technicians, or even the lot person, they all need to have access to the schedule, or so how, as a manager, how do I ensure that the system is tracking everything you talked about, and also, like, how do I control how much information people should have without jeopardizing efficiency?
So let me try and answer the question as well as I can. I'm not 100% sure I'm clear on what they're asking, but how do I ensure that everybody has the information that they need? One of the ways is that morning meeting that I talked about. If somebody doesn't have the information they need, that will come out in that morning meeting. And that's where you're going to identify the initial gaps where do people not have the access to the information they need. I was an oversharer. So if I was going to default to giving not enough or too much information, I'm going to give too much. What's the worst that's going to happen? I mean, this is, at the end of the day, this is a business, and we're selling and servicing RVs. We're selling fun. We're selling a lifestyle. We are not the CIA, and we are not launching secret rockets to the moon. There's nothing about what we do that is truly highly confidential or super sensitive. So if you're going, error to the side of overshare. Give people more information rather than less, if you're not sure. But I would say start with those morning meetings. Make those part of your daily routine. Never skip them. If somebody's unavailable to attend, you still have them and you catch them up later. But have them at the same time every morning. Should be the first thing you do. Should be set up for 10 minutes. And it shouldn't take more than 10 minutes. And we should only talk about what we're working on today. Start there. The gaps will make themselves evident.
So TMI for you.
Yep.
So, uh, so I don't see any other questions. So I'm going to ask that we share Matt's information if anybody wants to reach out and to have perhaps if they have anything specific, and to, yeah, if they just want to chat or learn more. So with that, I just want to thank Matt, thank IDS for your continued partnership, and for your leadership in supporting our dealers across US and Canada. And thank you for everybody that joined us today. And we hope you're walking away with a clear path on strengthening your fixed operations and more profit potential in a dealership.